Hello, hello, wherever you are in the world. This is Agnes van Rhijn. I am the owner of Success on Your Own Terms and the founder of the Women Who Make Things Happen show. Today, it's my great pleasure to be interviewing Siobhan McAuley. And Siobhan is a teacher, speaker, and mentor who believes that a woman that has financial freedom makes better decisions. That is why she teaches women how to do what they love and get paid for what they're worth for it. She is a free spirit and a truth seeker. She believes it's possible to live the life we dream of. And she also believes that any skill can be monetized and that life should be full of joy, ease, and abundance. She is on a mission to teach 300 million women how to monetize their skills so they can do what they love and live their lives without limits. Wow, what a perspective. I love that. Welcome, Siobhan. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm delighted to have you. And tell us, what was your dream originally? What is it that you wanted to make happen?
Well, a year ago, I decided that I wanted to earn $20,000 a month. But at the time, I was recovering from cancer. I was on welfare. I basically had, close to 100,000 in debt. I had no apparent way of generating that money, and I was not physically able to work at that point. I had a desire, though, for something more, something different in my life. And as a result of that desire, I started to notice new people, opportunities, resources that started to come into my field of experience. And one of those things was, what would my life look like if I was earning $20,000 a month?
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was in a relationship with a longtime friend turned lover, who lived in the United States and I lived in Canada. And one of the big problems that I was experiencing was how to maintain this relationship from a distance when financially there was lots of limitations around how much time we could spend together. And I thought, well, if I had $20,000 a month coming in, then I wouldn't have a problem. I'd just be able to come and go whenever I want. And I could stay in Canada and he could stay on his property in the States. And we wouldn't have all these conversations about we need to get married and how to get legal and all this kind of stuff. And so I set that as my goal. And here we are, less than a year later, and I achieved that a few months ago. Since then, one of the new opportunities that flooded into my field of awareness was also the opportunity for a visa. So I'm now actually living in the United States. So this call is happening from Tennessee on my partner's 14-acre property.
Wow.
And now my next goal is my 300 million women that I want to work with. Because
I love the idea.
Yeah. Well, once I hit that personal goal, it was wonderful, but I needed something bigger to reach for. I needed something beyond my own personal desires to keep motivating me to move forward. And so currently I'm in a growth stretch with my business where I'm moving from 20,000 a month to 50,000 a month because it became apparent that I wanted 20,000 as my income, but I'd need 50 to support my business to be able to take it to the level it needs to be at to reach 300 million women. Because clearly, reaching 300 million women is going to need a different skill set than the ones I was using a month ago or a year ago. So that's sort of the synopsis of my story.
Siobhan, I will ask you multiple questions around that, but just to go back to the 300 million women, do you think 300 million like you working directly with them, whether it's in group setting, etc., or is it by ripple effect reaching out that many people?
My initial thought was me working directly with them, and obviously it would have to be in a one-to-many model.
Yeah.
I don't think I have enough years or hours to be able to do it one-on-one. Like my goal would be able to have a direct impact on that many different women. But of course, I'm open to the ripple effect of whatever might happen for anyone that I'm working with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand. So if we rewind a bit, because I can imagine that for some of the listeners, your numbers make them feel dizzy a little bit. So if we go back, so to start with, the dream you're talking about is fairly recent. We're not talking about something that you had when you were a little girl or teenager or whatever. And you were holding that vision. So that was a very clear starting point for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little more about what background you had? Because I can imagine that some people would say, oh, yes, but for us, it's not the same.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is like, there's nothing special about me. Anyone can do what I did. My background was as a yoga teacher. So for 15 years, I taught yoga in the US and Canada. And what sort of motivated me to get to the point where I made this new decision or had a new goal, was that I noticed over 15 years of working in an industry where I had the opportunity to work with very high level teachers, very well respected. I owned my own studio. I taught in universities. I taught independently. I trained teachers. But the more experienced I got, the more I invested in myself, the less money I got paid. And the story I was telling myself was the market was getting saturated, mm-hmm. and that was all the market could bear. So that whatever I was earning was somehow beyond my control. It was a problem I couldn't fix. Mm-hmm. And after 15 years, I just got pissed off, basically. I started making $150 an hour 15 years ago, and then all of a sudden I was making $30 an hour. So I quit teaching altogether. And I decided I would just go do something else, and I would wait for inspiration. So for 3 years, I learned how to bake artisan bread, and I baked bread and I sold it in markets across the city in Toronto. And I just kind of gave myself permission to do something totally different that was enjoyable, and just kind of took the pressure off of like needing to figure out what was next. In the meantime, I developed this relationship. I made this relationship really difficult. I got sick with cancer. Once I was diagnosed, my initial diagnosis, I should have only been in hospital 5 days. I spent 2 months in hospital as a result of surgical complications. It was like very apparent that I was just making a lot of trouble for myself. Mm-hmm. Everything I was touching, I was making it be a problem, basically. And so coming out of that experience, it became clear that the only thing that was the common denominator was me, that I was going to have to change. And so prior to getting sick, I had decided that I would try coaching yoga teachers instead of teaching yoga classes, because mm-hmm. I felt really limited in the yoga environment. I didn't really want to teach people how to bend their bodies. I wanted to talk about much bigger philosophical mm-hmm. implications of a practice. And I felt like there was an expectation when I showed up that I couldn't speak to those things. So by moving into a coaching environment, I was able to start accessing all of my skills, knowledge, and resources, and I was able to help teachers improve the amount of money they were making and their teaching skills. But I was still trading my time for money at that point. So I was only charging $125 an hour. It became really apparent that like something had to give. My life was falling apart. My body was falling apart. Everything was falling apart. And if I didn't choose to change, that's what was going to continue to happen. And there wasn't really anywhere else to go. I was pretty much at my rock bottom at that point. So I believe that anyone can do what I did. And I also believe you don't have to be in such dire straits to understand the consequences of not taking control of what it is you want and making it a priority.
So how did you, I suppose, mentally manage to reach that switch? How did you decide it? What worked for you? How can you show people who are in stretch situations that it is possible? What did you do?
Well, I have to say that there's definitely what I would call kind of an internal alignment, an energetic stance mm-hmm. that you have to commit to. And really what it is it's not making the things that you want be negotiable. It's just not even being available for not having them be an option. So there's no more backdoor, there's no backup plan, there's no contingency. It's this way or it's nothing. Mm-hmm. And, there was 2 instances where I felt like that was really clear to me. One was when I was still in the hospital. Because of the surgical complications that I had, a month after my initial surgery, the surgery was part of the treatment, but it was also still part of the discovery process at that point. They didn't know how far the cancer had spread. So a month later, I was waiting for my pathology report. But because of all the complications due to the original surgery, I had been in hospital that entire time, was still in hospital, and every day there was something else going on. It was literally, physically just trying to stay alive. And I remember my father coming to the hospital that day and saying, we have to call the oncologist and get the pathology reports. And me saying to him, I'm not available for cancer. I don't have time for cancer. Like, I'm just trying to stay alive, you know? And so that was the first time that I felt there was a real clear energetic commitment. It was just like, no, I'm not available for that. So it's that kind of clarity. It's that kind of like resolve that needs to happen before change can really begin to unfold easily and effortlessly. Mm-hmm. The second time that it happened was when I was out of the hospital and I was starting to make a mess of my relationship again. And I was going into my old money story again. And I was just like running my old program essentially. And my sister called me out on it. And she was like, look, this isn't a problem about anybody but you. This is your stuff. You have been making a mess of this your whole life. It's you that's got to figure this out. And, you know, at that time I was laying on a couch. I couldn't open a jar. I couldn't walk. I was still very sick. Mm-hmm. And so that hurt, but it was the best conversation that I've ever had with anybody because it changed my life. If she hadn't been so honest with me, I wouldn't have had the clarity that said, you know, she was right. If I didn't make a change right then and there, I was going to continue to get sick and eventually I would die. So for me, it felt like that was the only option. I had to make a change and I had to do everything I could and commit 100% to moving forward because the only thing left was to go back to what I had just come out of and I wasn't going to go back to that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think there has to be that sense of a very real present consequence if you don't make change happen. And at the same time, I don't think you need your situation to be so dire to be able to get clarity on that. What I do see happening is that a lot of the time we put the consequences of the choices that we're making so far off into the distance that we don't feel the immediate pain of them anymore. Uh-huh. It's until the consequence is really up close and personal that we're just like, yeah, if I don't do this, like it's just not even an option, right?
So you start with your vision and you immediately look at what's happening if this is not happening. And I would say to a certain extent, really connect to that pain. Yeah. So that it motivates you.
Yeah. So I think it's the first step is clarity. Like you really have to understand what is it that you really want? And you have to understand why is it that you want that thing? So in my case, I wanted to have the opportunity to have a life here in Tennessee with the man that I loved. I'd not had a relationship that I wanted to experience that with. So that was an important sort of life goal for me to challenge myself in that human condition, in that experience. I wanted to resolve the issue of me falsely believing that I couldn't take care of myself, because that was the limiting belief that I was raised with, that I was the one in the family that wouldn't amount to anything financially. I was out of a backpack. You know, I didn't know how to manage my money. So like, I wanted to put that story to rest, and I wanted to show myself and everyone else that I could take care of all those things. So once there's that sense of clarity and you understand why it is that's important to you, then the next step is like, well, what's the urgency around making change happen? But if you can connect that to a why, a bigger reason for what you're doing, the urgency becomes self-evident, and it's no longer something that you want. It's something that becomes a need. It's a requirement in order for you to be the person you need to be in the world.
And that's when you find the energy to make things happen. I remember when I stepped out of corporate, which is probably 8-9 years ago now. Well, not when I stepped out. When I started my reconversion, I was having this type of full-time corporate job where, you know, they require 200% of your time. So every end of the week, I was completely dead. And I suddenly went for a reconversion to coaching. I loved it and I was passionate about it, but I had to go through 400 hours, if I remember well, of training. I was raising my kids alone, but I made it work. And well, I was tired at the end of the week, but I was as tired as before without all of that on top of it. And it just worked, because once you are really connected to what is important to you, I can really see that. Yeah, that's.
And I believe that like everything in the universe exists to grow, to evolve, to be expanding. And even when we're at a place in our life where we feel stuck, or we feel like we have no choice, or we tell our story about being content with what we have, and behind that is usually the limiting belief of, well, I don't need any more. And it's like, it's not a matter about what you need. It's a matter of what you want. You would not have desire if desire did not have a purpose, right? Like, your desire is a spiritual gift. It's the impetus that helps you to grow. So every human being has within them the ability to imagine something more for themselves. And it has a very necessary function. But most of us are spending a lot of our time sort of trying to edit and censor and keep that desire in check, because we've got all these stories around, or conditions that we believe are determining what we're allowed to have. So when we can connect to a higher purpose, when we can say, I was put on this planet to be able to fulfill my unique version of desire, then suddenly something else opens up, because now there's something bigger than ourselves. It's like, for me to reach 300 million women, the vision for me doing that is because I feel the impact of my ability to learn how to monetize my skills and how to break out of that trading time for money way of living, that mentality. I've seen how it's transformed my life and the people in my life as a result of that. If I can give that gift to 300 million women, I can change the world. So that's a bigger purpose. So when we can connect to fulfilling a purpose, our why becomes evident, and whatever it takes, we're happy to do, because it's connecting us to our reason for being.
You make me, talking about those 300 million women again, brought me back to what what I said in the presentation about you thinking that a woman that has financial freedom makes better decisions. Can you elaborate on what you're seeing around that?
Yeah, well, think about how many times in the course of a day you may not even be conscious of it, but there's this voice in your head that it's like you see something that you like, you feel a desire for something more, but there's this automatic response that's like, I can't have it now, I can't afford it, I have to wait, what would people think of me if I want that? And so we're constantly editing and censoring what it is we're allowed to have. More often than not, it's based on the apparent absence or lack of resources. So for example, I have a Honda Civic, but I want to drive a Volvo wagon. So I might tell myself, well, I can't have the Volvo because I don't have the money. So immediately I've cut off a part of my desire. But if our desire is a spiritual impulse, if it's a gift from the universe that's saying, here's an opportunity for you to grow and experience more of who you are and to understand what it is to live your fullest potential, then that's a gift that we have to act on. And when a woman is making decisions based on an apparent lack of resources or an absence of resources, support, knowledge, whatever it is that she's missing, all of a sudden who she is, who she's capable of being, it's like parts of herself are being cut off all the time. So a woman is a relationship builder in society. She's impacting so many people, right? That's the model that she's setting up. That has a ripple effect. She's teaching her children it's okay for you to be less than what you know yourself to be or desire to be. So money is really just the tool. But if we view money as being something that we have to have before we can do what we want or experience what we want, then we become the tool. Things get turned around.
Yeah.
So, like we wouldn't have the ability to monetize our skills if we weren't supposed to be able to do that. Money is just the tool that allows us to be, do, have, or experience all the things that we want so that we can be an example to anybody else in the world of what they can be, do, have, or experience, what they want.
Yeah, fascinating topic that we could elaborate on for hours. once you started setting up your business, what are the major challenges that you have been facing?
Initially, I really don't like doing the business end of things. I don't like doing anything technical, administrative, computer related. I'm like, I want to pay someone to do all that stuff. So some of the growth challenges that I had were, I think I had my business up and running for about 2 months before I hired my first virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. When I hired her, I wanted her to take over my newsletter and client enrollment processes for me, because that was kind of a lot of administrative stuff. So I got her kind of up and running and trained, but I felt like we never really got to a place where it was creating less work for me. It felt like the same workload. It was just a different kind of workload. I was managing somebody else instead of the processes. So then I upgraded to an online business manager. I spent a lot more money. I had a much more personal interaction, more access to her, and my clients had a much nicer, high-touch value relationship in the client enrollment process, which was great because my prices were increasing. But then within a matter of a couple of months, I realized I'd outgrown that, and then I had to hire a team. So now I have a team that supports me, and I have a variety of things that they take care of for me. So the big lesson that I learned there was it's really important to hire support for where you're going, not where you are. Yeah. And so I always tell my clients, hire support before you need it. Mm-hmm. Always act as if and think like the woman that you want to be, not the one that you currently are. So in my case, I had to start looking at my life from the perspective of, I'm not bringing in $10,000 a month, I'm bringing in $20,000 a month. And what kind of systems and structures do I need in place to make that consistent? And then going from 20 to 50, what kind of training, support, mentors, resources do I need to make that possible? Because that person thinks very differently than the one who is making $10,000 a month.
So from a, I would say, delegation point of view, I see a lot of women in particular struggling with giving away something. I will do it better. I love doing it. It takes me more time to explain, etc. Did you experience something like that as well?
I didn't, but I owned a yoga studio in the States about 10 years ago, and I learned in that process. I was really lucky, actually. I had a couple of male business mentors at that time in my life that were really invaluable. And one of the first things I learned was that a smart business owner surrounds themselves with experts that make them look good. And so I know that the only thing that I'm responsible for in my business, there's two things. One is, it's my job to do the thing that makes the money. I'm the only person in my business that can bring the money in. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, it's my job to do what I love. Mm-hmm. Everything else, I pay someone else to do. And the woman who's earning $50,000 a month, she knows that the person to get the job done is the expert in their field. Mm-hmm. And it's my job to make sure that I've got enough money available to pay the best person to do the best job possible. So, for example, I'm working on a book project right now. I have an editor, and she doesn't package her services the way that I do. Excuse me. And she's sort of new at this process. So she's like, well, I really don't know what to say. Like, I normally charge by the hour. And I'm like, Andrea, you need to guess how many hours you think it's going to take to do this job. You need to double the time, and you need to charge me that. Because I don't want the people who work for me to ever feel like financial limitations are going to prevent them from doing the best job possible. I'm hiring them because they're an expert. Mm-hmm. So when a woman is not delegating, that's a control issue on her part. It's her not giving herself permission to do what she loves. It's her not being willing to step into doing her role as being the business owner. It's very small-minded thinking is what it is, right? The person who thinks they have to do it all is never going to achieve great things. No, definitely. You can't do it on your own. That's the reality. And the universal law of more life will say that every time I support someone else in their business, their family benefits, their clients benefit, right? So me having more actually means everybody else around me has more as well. And the universe is always going to support that. So the money is always there for it.
You made me think of something else as well, where you mentioned earlier on that at the beginning you were not so business driven, I would say. You and I discussed before our call the fact that I'm working with women who basically are on the verge of a burnout, either because they didn't take care of themselves in that process, but also because they forgot there was a business side to things, and that running a business is something serious. How have you managed to transition to that? Because apparently you did it fairly quickly.
In terms of like, how do I stay connected to doing what needs to get done to run the business and not lose myself completely? Or
no, in terms of, you mentioned earlier on that the business aspect of things was not your thing, but maybe you were saying was not your thing, but you knew it was there, that it was needed. Maybe I misunderstood you.
I knew that there were certain things that had to happen to make my business move forward. And I also knew that I didn't like doing those things, like doing that type of administrative work. There's nothing that'll get me in a bad mood quicker. And I know that that doesn't do me or anyone in my life any good if I'm in a bad mood. I'm a big believer that I should only be doing what makes me happy, because when I'm happy, everything is coming to me easily and effortlessly. So yeah, like 2 months into my business, I was hiring a VA. Most people would have thought, what are you doing spending money on a VA? But to me, that was a good expenditure because it meant that I would be happy. So for months, I had a website that, you know, wasn't necessarily what I liked, but it was functional and it wasn't stopping me from making money. So it was better for me to spend money on doing something that I didn't want to do, that somebody else could do better.
Okay, so your very first choice, basically conscious business owner's choice, was to delegate everything where you did not add value, basically.
Yeah, and so everything else, like I wrote all my own copy. I already had a website, and I had a young college student who would do updates for me if I couldn't do them myself. But otherwise, I was like changing the copy out of my site myself. I was taking care of my client processes or whatever. But as soon as possible, I was delegating anything administrative related. And then as my business grew and things became more complex, I took on more and more support. So my goal is always only to ever work with my clients and to create content. So my job is really like the visionary. It's the information piece. How can I get this information into the hands of the people that need it? And then everything else basically can be hired out.
Okay. I'm, as usual, being conscious of time. Is there anything special? Well, no, before we forget, where can people find you? Because I tend to forget that once in a while. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is called stirringthesoul.com. And so there's lots of information on the site. And then also in Facebook, I've got a public Facebook group that's called Just Say Yes, Life Without Limits. So those are probably the two best places for people to find me.
Who are your ideal clients? Who are you working with?
Right now, the women that I work with are generally women who they've got a desire to be able to do what it is they really love. So these aren't women who are necessarily just starting out from scratch. They're not in a place of financial struggle. They're in a place where they understand they're going to need to make an investment to be able to live the life that they want at the level that they want. But their big trip up is getting past all the limiting beliefs that are keeping them locked into living a life that isn't really in alignment or congruent with what they love. My whole thing is like, you have to choose to be happy no matter what. For me, if the cancer comes back, I have to choose happiness no matter what. So at the foundation of everything I do with my clients is you have to be loving what you do. Otherwise, there's no motivation for you to do whatever it's going to take for you to attain your goals. Right? Like achieving a level of personal excellence and pushing the boundaries of what's possible for you as a human being requires that you're moving through constant challenges. So you've got to love what it is you're doing, that process. So my goal is to teach women how to monetize that, the thing that they love. And I firmly believe that it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done, your knowledge, skills, and experience have value for someone in the world and can be monetized. So any woman who's in that situation, that's who I work with.
Okay. And quickly, another question that I forgot. How early in the process of setting up your own business did you have your own coach or mentor?
I had a coach before I had a business.
Before. Okay.
Yeah, it was hiring a coach that really, I wouldn't know how to do what I do had I not hired a coach.
Mm-hmm. Good to hear that. I'm preaching to the converted.
Yeah, and I continue to hire coaches who are already doing or have done what I seek to do next. I firmly believe I am never without a coach.
Okay. Any other quick tip before we have to set an end to this interview?
No, just I think in terms of your audience, I think the best thing is for women who have left the corporate world and they are doing their own thing, but they're understanding that they're not doing it on the terms that they want to be doing, that no matter what obstacle they are facing, there is the opportunity to resolve that, because the universal law of understanding desire and law of attraction is if there is a desire for something more, something different, the supply or the solution to fulfill that is already there. So I guess that would be my message for anybody, is just keep following your desire, no matter what, keep following it, because the answer is there.
I have said it multiple times already on this show, but I personally was very, I was going to say impressed, it's not the right word, but I'll always remember this French navigator who crossed the Atlantic rowing. And she's like that, very thin, beautiful young woman, or at least she was then. And when she arrived at the finish, she said, "Don't let anyone ever tell you that your dream is impossible." I really love that.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Because like I said, your desire is a gift. You know, it is the key to your spiritual development and growth as a human being, right? So if you do one thing in life, it's follow that desire.
Siobhan, thank you so much for this interview. I've really enjoyed it. It will be made available on my website, www.anyesvanrhijn.com. So that's ANYESVANRHIJN.com. And there is a tab, WWMTH, Women Who Make Things Happen interviews. It will be made available there for 1 week, both in podcast and video format. And thereafter it will be moved to the archive page, for which people have to opt in if they want to get access to it. Thank you so much, and well, enjoy your time in Tennessee.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.